everyone. I'm your host, Louisa Rolandhagen, and we're back with another episode of ADP Payroll Around the World. This audio series serves as your guide to how payroll really works in a specific country. We really dig into the details of what makes payroll tick and speak to both ADP experts on the ground and locals who will give us their perspective on work and pay in their homeland. After all, payroll can't really be global if it isn't local as well. Please join me today on a trip to France. With an average 77.8 million visitors a year, the European country is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. The French government traditionally offers its citizens a high degree of social security, which is one of the reasons why French payroll is considered to be notoriously complex. In fact, in any global ranking of countries by payroll complexity, you'll often find France in the top spot.
It is clear that France has a very complex social environment and also social legislation and payroll calculation. Probably this comes from legislation because, for example, the number of social tax has increased by nearly 50% over the past 8 years.
Being on the other side of things as an employee doesn't seem to be much easier either.
Even though you can speak a very high level of French, I think it's still very challenging being in France and working in France and getting your head around the bureaucracy and understanding health insurance and what you need to do for taxes and all of that.
But despite the complexity, France is still a very popular location and a leading destination in Europe for foreign investment in sectors such as AI.
I'm seeing more and more that multinationals are choosing France as a playground to have and develop their business.
So today, we're going to take a deeper look at what makes French payroll work and find out how ADP is helping multinationals navigate those waters. You've just heard a little teaser from our two experts for this episode, as well as Rachel, who's a British expat living and working in Paris. She'll be telling us a bit more about what it's like for her to deal with French bureaucracy as a foreign employee. But first, let's meet our ADP experts.
So, hello, I am Emmanuel Prévost. I'm in charge of the Legal Watch and Template teams for France.
Emmanuel has been with ADP since 1998 and is based in Nanterre, close to Paris. He's joined by Carlos.
So I am Carlos Fontelas de Carvalho. I'm the president of ADP France and other 4 countries on Central Europe. And I'm here at ADP since 2013 and also based here in Nanterre.
Thank you both for joining us today. I'd like to kick us off by getting straight to it. Why is payroll in France so complicated?
Yes, a payslip is quite, I would say, complex. We have really the pole position of there's a complexity index and France is on the top. But at the same time means transparency. On my payslip, I see my interaction with the administrative entities. I see my interaction as a citizen. So it's very transparent where goes the money, what I'm being paid for, and all the details. So at the same time, it's a mix of complexity and transparency.
The complexity is also found in the number of collective agreements. We have to face 800 collective agreements in France and the number of contracts for the company. France has, for example, more than 500 mutual insurance company, insurance, pension fund. So that means, as Carlos said, the payroll is complex because you have more than 50 lines on a bulletin. But also, according to the mandatory monthly report called DSN, because it is 350 data every month to send for each employee. So we have to make sure every month that the rules are followed and that all the data is correct. So it's a very important and accurate work.
Okay, so it's complex because of all the contributions to the country's extensive social security system and collective bargaining agreements, as well as extensive reporting obligations. Anything else?
The complexity is here because we have many industry where the pay is totally different. For example, the payroll calculation in a bank area is totally different from the one of a building company or entertainment company. That the status of the employee is also concern. For example, we have several types of apprenticeships, corporate officers, employees on fixed term or permanent contracts with their own rules. And if you had the exemption of contribution that's depend on the status of the company, then of course you have a cocktail of a complexity.
I love that term, cocktail of complexity. Why is there a difference in sectors?
It's because we are in a different collective agreement. So the minimum salary are totally different. The way of increases wages also. The collective agreements are setting some of the contribution rates. So you have a stack of rules that you have to know how to implement.
Let me give you an example to make it more clear. For instance, we have here a rule, and once again, it's taking to the transparency than the way socially the country is so complex. The hours, the way we measure hours on the banking system, on the construction, on entertainment, or in retail, or in the restaurant business, we have it what we call penibility. So how hardful is to spend those same hours. So the way a waiter in a restaurant passes his 8 hours because he's on foot, because it could be to aggressive temperatures, could be in construction, taking hard objects. It measures in a different way, and it measures also in a different way to the age of retirement. So it's this kind of, I would say, particularity that makes, yes, I had a full day of work, but a full day of work with a hard way of working and the quantity and the calculation of the hours that makes on the payslip, this all's been calculated.
Right, that makes sense. So it's not just about how many hours you worked, it's also about how physically demanding that work was. I think it's actually pretty cool that this is acknowledged. So, given that the regulations around labor and pay are pretty intricate in France, what advice would you give to multinationals who are interested in setting up shop there?
They need central reporting. They need to have all the information at time. And in France means that ADP provides a service that in terms of monitor all legal developments, and we have a big team of lawyers, I would say the biggest team and the best team of lawyers in all France, because it's more than 20 lawyers that are working only for getting in touch with our customers. But at the same time, they have a connection in terms of with the public authorities to anticipate these kind of changes every day. This is so important for multinationals because so many updates, so many things at the same time that the peace of mind requires a full, complex, but at the same time steady legal watch at all time. Isn't that so, Emmanuel?
Yeah, that's clear. Because we are working on a fully compliancy, we need to, of course, to have a strong service within ADP to monitor the legal developments and also and before the legal watch. So in my teams, we had 20 lawyers who are analyzing the text and especially works upstream with the public authority to anticipate them to the maximums. So it's a never-ended work to be sure that we have a fully comprehension of the new text. That helps to understand the spirit of this text and the rules to be that we have to implement it. So yes, we are creating a secure environment for our customers. And we have also a service that allow our clients to request legal assistance on all elements concerning the life of the employee in the company. So we are answering to questions about leave, illness, dismissal, hiring. So it's very secure for our customers, and that gives them a very user-friendly experience. It's not a difficulty for my team because we are following more than 500 collective agreements. So wherever the client is working on, we will have the capability to follow the collective agreement and to be compliant on that subject.
Because ADP is a company that prioritizes local expertise on the ground, this series also gives a platform to the experiences of people who live and work in the country we're featuring. So we wanted to hear from Rachel, a journalist who's originally from the UK, but who's been living in Paris and working at a French company for almost 2 years now. Although she had studied French in university, she suddenly found herself having to use the language to navigate professional and bureaucratic requirements.
I was excited. I knew that I spoke, I thought I spoke a relatively high level of French, but as I'm sure anyone will tell you, it's one thing to be good at it at uni, and it's another thing to move to the country and to work in the language. It's always a bit of a challenge. It's very humbling, definitely.
Remember Carlos telling us about how complex a payslip is? Rachel can definitely relate to that.
I think the main thing was understanding my payslip, because with my payslip, we had social security deductions, which is money that's taken out of your salary that goes towards the French government, but tax is then paid separately on top of that, if that makes sense. You have social security, which is used to fund healthcare, but then you also get taxed on top of that. So I think once I asked the question, it was relatively straightforward getting an answer. But yeah, I think you do just need someone to explain these things to you when you first arrive, because it doesn't make a lot of sense a lot of the time, because you look at your payslip, you think, oh, okay, well, that's social security, that must be tax, but it's not. Tax is something different. And then filling out a tax return form, I didn't know that I had to do that myself. I think I just assumed, oh, well, I'm being taxed already, but you actually have to fill out a form on top of all of the pay slips that you get. But again, once someone explained that to me and told me what I had to do, so I had to go to the tax office and ask for a form, and someone at the tax office then helped me and told me what documents I needed to bring to fill out my first tax return form.
Thankfully, Rachel was able to find people who could help her parse through the complexity.
I think once you have someone explain to you, oh, okay, well, actually, you're on a contract, you need to fill out this form, and then the rest of it is irrelevant. Like, you don't need to worry about these other 5 boxes, because these are for people who are on a different, who have a different income to you, or who are self-employed or whatever. And once you understand how the system works as well, it then makes sense. Once you understand, oh, okay, so the reason why I've got to fill out a form for this is because this then goes to this person, and then they work it out. Like, once you understand how the system works, it's a lot easier, I think.
Even though it took a while for Rachel to adjust to the French system, she found that both her French and expat colleagues played a major role in making her feel integrated.
So I think, yeah, when you first start a new job, it's always going to be quite challenging. And add to that, it's all new, because it's a new job in a new country with new people, with a new language. There are always going to be challenges to that.
Almost 1 out of 10 workers in France come from abroad. I wanted to know whether Carlos and Emmanuel could tell me a little bit more about how ADP is helping their clients, and especially their payroll teams, onboard foreign workers.
This is always happening, and happens more and more with these new companies that are establishing here in France. How I'm going to be attractive on recruiting, how I'm going to explain correctly how it's going to be, because I know for sure what is the gross, but I have no idea at the end what's going to be the net, and what are the rights, and what are the things that he needs to comply. So what we help here, and we have like a species of a handbook that is a virtual handbook to the new joiners. We have tutorials, and we have also training. And training in France done by ADP, as we are one of the biggest training certificate companies that we have in terms of HR and payroll certification, gives this kind of tutorials to make it like it's going to be payroll for dummies. It's like saying, when you arrive, what are the 10 key things that you need to know? What are the 10 key rights that you have? And what are the things that you should do and you must not do, compared inclusive to other countries? Because as we know, the rules that happens with my fellow colleague that is in Spain or in Italy and Germany or in UK, we can do like a species of gap analysis of all the things that can be quite different. And this is something that very regularly customers ask us to do in the first 3 months of work. It's more than training, giving this kind of what is the top 10 thing that I need to know in a 5-minute speech that he needs to know about the payroll. Yes, and definitely something that you really need to do, because it's quite different in France.
The difficulty are here, but we support our clients both in our service, but also in our payroll management tools. For example, our offers are very templated. That means that could be an insurance in compliance, because we have several thousand modeling rules that cover the majority of the legal and collective agreement options. So If the company wish to deviate from it, we will analyze the case and come back to it to tell that it cannot be implemented. I remember, for example, a company that wanted to force the withholding tax rate on of one of its employee. This is totally not possible due to the law because the rates are issued to the employers by the public treasury. So the company would have risked a very high penalty if it has done so. Yes, we are here to support them and to help them toward these compliance rules.
While researching this episode, I came across something that I was hoping you two could clear up for me. I read that when you hire someone in France, you're required to be compliant from moment zero. What does that mean?
That means that in any new hiring process, for example, there is a form to respect. I'm not just talking about the announcement, of course, but there is also the formalism of the employment contract, the fact that it's necessary before the arrival of the employee in the company to have declared his arrival to the contribution collector called URSSAF. Otherwise, the company has a risk of undeclared work. Another example, you cannot collect the employee's withholding tax rate before the signing of the contract. In a short, a number of rules to respect that requires knowledge of the legislation. Otherwise, you risk not only difficulty with the employee, but also with the public authority.
And it is very, very tiny differences, but could be a huge penalty for the company. So imagine a multinational company that has someone working outside France and say, oh, let's send the standard contract and let's send him during the week and he can start work already. That could be making huge penalties for the company if on the first day it doesn't have any contract signed. So, and these kind of things, you need a good partner. You need a reliable partner to understand and to anticipate what is going to happen when you start your business in France, because it's good to have business in France. You just have to follow the rules.
What happens if you don't follow the rules?
We have two types of collector, social and fiscal collectors. So they could give some penalty to the company. We talk about the monthly social declaration called DSN. The information are sent to 34 public authority through this declaration, and of course, depending to the case, the penalty could be given also by other organizations. So it's that could be really, really huge amount of penalties. For example, on the fiscal case, if some mistake could be done, it could be, for example, 10% of the amount as a penalty. So it's that could be quickly huge. And then you could have also some risk coming from the employees, because if the compliance is not giving at the payslips level, of course, they have some action that could be done by the employees. So the difficulty when you are processing payslip is to, of course, to be compliant every month for everyone, for every public authority, and of course for the employees. And also because the rights, the long-term rights, for example, for retirement calculation, are sent through the monthly social declaration. So you need to be compliant because it could be 10 years after to have some difficulties for the employees if you are making some mistakes. So we need to be compliant every month.
Would say as an example also that France is a unique country in terms of, and I mentioned before, in terms of the transparency between employer and employee. And it's not only the pay slips, it's the way we work, the way we communicate. That's why also unions are very present in France, is because of they know correctly their rights and they know how to defend their rights. So that means that the company that does not follow this alignment, does not follow this discipline, can have immediately and very reactive, aggressive reaction in terms of their employees, and at the same time in terms of exposure to the market itself. So it means that the anticipation, being well partnered with a good partner in terms of payroll like ADP, is quite key in terms of anticipate and follow the rules. Just a small example at the end, the CEO of a company here in France, wherever it is a branch of a different country, has unlimited responsibility in terms of social to their employees. So that means that he can go to jail if he doesn't follow the rules. And that is quite, I would say, tough, but at the same time, you need to know the rules. This is way it is to work in France.
Wow, those are really high stakes then.
Very high.
Since we're on the subject of compliance, are there any reporting requirements that employers must comply with, such as reporting on the wage distribution in their workforce according to gender?
We have several action and rules to follow and to respect. For example, if we are talking about gender pay gap reporting, first of all employees, regardless of the size of their enterprise, must ensure equal pay for women and men for the same work or work of equal value. The employee of at least, for example, 50 employees must report to the staff representative during mandatory consultation some indicators on the wage gap. They have to produce it and to put them in a social and environmental economic database that is shared with the trade unions. And employers with at least 300 employees have more indicators to produce regarding the wage gap.
France adopted an energy and climate bill in 2019 that is meant to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and promote greener industrial practices. Are there any requirements that businesses need to comply with on this front?
It's related to the carbon footprint. So more and more related to inclusive the Paris meeting that every countries needed to have their own agenda in terms of ecological. France anticipated these rules to the French right and the French law. So that means the companies need to anticipate in terms of, for instance, electricity consumption, in terms of how the employees come to the office and the transportation that they need to take. Everything is measured in order to, once again, gives up to an index that needs to be published and gives the performance of each company. And the correct data, the timing of that data that comes on the payroll at the end, at the payroll system, it needs to be very accurate and in timely in order to do that. And of course, we comply and gives that reporting to all of our customers.
So, businesses in France are required to report and process massive amounts of data every month. Obviously, the payroll department is spearheading and managing all of this. We're going to be wrapping things up, but I just want to end by asking you two, what do you personally love about working in payroll in France?
I would say that is both the young and young. It's delicate, but it's exciting. Then why? Because we need to comply every time, and you need to be aware of everything that needs to be done. The declarations, the payroll itself, do the right thing at the right timing, no matter what is the environment. But at the same time, it's something that we know that each month that while we provide gives transparency and peace of mind for our companies. And it's really our expertise. More than 50 years in France, 75 years world-known, market leader, but a big responsibility also. So that the more than 3 million pay slips that we calculate every month on the private sector give us this proud to do something that works out for the companies and makes our associates and our colleagues so proud of participate on that. So I'd say exciting because it's complex and they need us, but at the same time, this complexity make us the next day is never the same day as the day before because there are so many legislation changes that every time something is happening.
For our employees, it's very exciting because the legislation is constantly changing. So definitively, if you like stability or routine, then it's not in this sector of activity that you have to work because it's a never-ending story, and that's the exciting point.
Carlos and Emmanuel, thank you so much for your time and expertise. It was great to chat with you and get a better understanding of why payroll in France is considered to be so complex. I hope you got a bit of a deeper insight into how payroll in France works today. If this episode has piqued your interest, or your company is considering expanding into France and you want to learn more about payroll there, please go to the ADP France website, fr.adp.com. And don't forget to subscribe to learn more about payroll around the world with each new episode. You've been listening to ADP Payroll Around the World, produced by ADP and Story Things.